What's going on, Collectibles?
X-Men.
Friends, back again. Another day, another video. We are back. It's the Pop Culture Hub here in my office.
Whoa.
We're going to talk about today how just this thing has exploded. Pop culture collectibles and how the market has changed so much. Actually, just the overall hobby / interest. And this sort of stuff has changed dramatically over the last 10 years. And I know for my age group, a lot of people kind of in that 35 to 50-year-old age bracket, a lot of the 80s, 90s kids, for a lot of us, it's just going back in time and remembering a better time, frankly, when we didn't have as many responsibilities. The world was a different place, not necessarily better or worse, but we remember a more simple time, pre-internet, pre all the extra things that are here in 2024. And the one thing that I have been so excited to see, whether it be on YouTube or IG, anywhere you look on social media, is all of the channels and different accounts that pop up of different people collecting various collectibles, pop culture collectibles. Of course, behind me you see, I've got Beavis and Butthead, I've got Ninja Turtles, I've got Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, I've got Voltron on my shirt, I've got Alf. I've got cards, it's all here, and I think that a lot of people are like me. And it is nice to think that, hey, you know what? We're not just all nerds. We actually had, these great memories going back in time to those early years. And again, just during kind of more simple times, maybe happier times, maybe not, just depending on your childhood. But I think the one thing we can always look back to is there's certain iconic characters, TV shows, movies, musicians, games, whatever that is that we grew up with, that we still carry with us today. And we all know, if we go back kind of pre-pandemic especially, not that there wasn't interest in, comic books and trading cards and these things. Of course there was, but especially going back 10, 15 years, there was much more of a focus, if we're talking about really investment dollars. And investment's a loose term. Money that people are putting into things as a store of value or, buy it here now. It's a cool thing to own. And then down the road, hopefully it's worth more. A lot of this type of money, and still is in these categories, but a lot of it, especially going back, was coins, currency, and antiques. Rare antiques. Of course, rare coins still very popular, of course. But it is now shifted to where we have brought in kind of all of the pop culture stuff, and not just on the athletes that were legends, but a lot of people thinking like, hey, who is important in history? Who are these historical figures? I've picked up over the last few years some of these presidential cards that I think are interesting. I've got some Abe Lincoln cards and some Washington cards that go back to the 20s, just because honestly, they're inexpensive compared to pre-war baseball cards. Far more inexpensive. Another couple of examples of just kind of pop culture, Frank Sinatra, early Frank Sinatra cards. This one is from 1947, Turf Cigarettes card. And then, of course, 1939 Bridgewater, Ronald Reagan card. And you can look at kind of any of these types of things. Who's important in history? Do they have a trading card or a collectible? And of course, it makes it interesting. I am today going to see the new Ghostbusters Frozen Empire movie. I am so pumped. And in honor of that, I have to show my 2016 Ghostbusters set. It's the Dan Aykroyd autograph. Didn't know this existed. Shout out to my buddy, another great channel, Flipping Steve, that actually introduced me to this set. Dan Aykroyd, unfortunately not a Bill Murray autograph in there, but there is a Dan Aykroyd. Of course, trading cards always been popular and still very, very popular. The one space too that has absolutely exploded over the last few years, Pokemon cards. Man, especially when you look at third-party grading. Of course, you've got other types of TCGs that are out there getting graded, whether it's Lorcana or Magic the Gathering, but Pokemon is a global force phenomenon when it comes to trading cards. The new sets that come out, they just sell. So many people collecting Pokemon cards. You've got sports cards that are on fire. You've got TCG and the non-sports stuff. You've got comic books. This is one that I recently picked up. This is from the 90s, Spawn, Todd McFarlane. He is the guy from Amazing Spider-Man 300 that was a co-creator of Venom, the character Venom. Spawn, of course, his most popular title going back to the early 90s. That's still running today, and I heard him say something like he wants it to run until he's 80 or something, be the longest running comic book ever. So people like me have been picking up some of these interesting kind of artifacts, these pop culture pieces over time. Graded video games. Can't leave out graded video games. This is one of the only sealed copies that I've got. I've got quite a few CIB graded video games as well, but this is the original Final Fantasy, the RPG that kind of started it all. Not really, not the one that started it all, but a very, very popular title that then had many, many sequels to it, and it's spawned into many other RPGs. A lot of the other RPG creators were looking at this particular game for ideas and kind of to spearhead their own game. So graded games, I think, are just very interesting. And of course, for me, I've said this before on the channel, I was born in 81, so I'm an NES kid. I was a little bit too young to play the Atari. I do have some Atari games as well, graded Atari games that are sealed, because I just respect the fact that that was a very, very important company going back in time, for video games. If you look at Pong and, how video games kind of evolved. And then, of course, the other vintage, the retro vintage games, NES, I think that's funny. It makes me feel old, but it makes me feel good that I was kind of on the ground floor of vintage retro games, were those, of course, those original NES games like Final Fantasy. And it's just very, very cool stuff. So we have seen no slowdown, and not really a slowdown in sight. And not even just the stuff I showed, but there's movie props. People are collecting moments. People are looking for things. Of course, we've all got, stocks, bonds, real estate, kind of the foundational financial pieces. Some people have crypto. I've got some of it. I think there's just people are looking at different things, interesting things outside of traditional investments. And these are, of course, alternative investments. We're loosely putting it as an investment. It's really kind of a store of value, collectibles. Some of it might go up in the future, but there's zero guarantees with any of it. But I think the one thing that stands out is the pride of ownership with collectibles that you don't have with a lot of other things. With a lot of the pop culture, kind of the really interesting stuff, the movie prop stuff is fascinating to me, where you have stuff that was used on set. That's a period of time, especially if you look at like old movies, like classics like E.T. or Gremlins or Goonies or something like that. You've got these iconic movies, TV shows, games, whatever it is, and you can now kind of own the piece of history, and we've just seen this go absolutely ballistic. And again, I don't think it slows down, not to take away from antiques and some of those kind of more traditional alternative investments for collectibles. It's not going to go away, obviously, but there has most certainly been money that has moved into pop culture collectibles for iconic characters like Mario, for Pikachu and all the Pokemon stuff, and there's new generations that are getting into these characters. So all these 80s, 90s, they're being rebooted, and then of course a next generation of folks is being introduced, and some of that old kind of those classic first edition things, whether we're talking about action figures or first appearance comic book or first game or whatever it is. It's going to be interesting to see how it goes, but I'm really excited to have the pride of ownership, to own these things, and to keep track of interest as we move forward. Guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What are you collecting these days? What is something that you own? Pride of ownership. What is something that you really love? You got it, and you're like, oh man, you struggled to get it. Maybe you had to save up for it, or maybe it's really rare. It just took forever to be able to come up for sale to where you could get one. Let me know in the comments below. Stay healthy, stay awesome, and I will talk to you again later.